let's look through the league right now, and you look at the defensive style of games that we have seen so far this offseason. Obviously, the Chargers adding, a big time pass rusher, Khalil Mack, and then adding J.C. Jackson from the New England Patriots, and you really, bringing that defense together, and then Justin Herbert, who had a sensational year last year, and some certain parts of the end of the season, he just didn't get it done against the Texans. He didn't show up in that game, and maybe some of the teams, the whole team didn't show up in that game. But this team is the most complete team in the NFL, and I think a lot of people, if you're a betting man, I would definitely put a little bit of money on the Chargers going to the Super Bowl and winning it all this year. What are your thoughts with the Chargers? What are your thoughts with some of the acquisitions they made? Do you think that this team is a contender this year with some of the acquisitions they made in the offseason?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, they're already a team with Bosa, and I'm blanking on the Derwin James at
yep.
safety. So, I mean, they already had two premier players, so they added two more absolute studs on the defensive side of the football. The offense was never the issue. They're scoring tons of points with Herbert, and then you have Allen over there, and Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler in the backfield. They drafted in the third round. They took Isaiah Spiller, who I think is going to be the between the tackles guy they've been wanting to not have to, run Austin Eckler out there on, 4th and 1 on the 1 yard line. They don't want Austin Eckler for that. They want somebody like an Isaiah Spiller. So I think they got a guy to fill that role finally. So you're absolutely right. When looking at a team from top to bottom, at least on paper, we'll see how it all gels and comes together once they get on the field. But on paper, they're just as good as any team. The interesting part's going to be that division is going to be nuts. I mean, that division is going to be – we already have Kansas City, who's been, the class of the division for a few years now. You have the Las Vegas Raiders, who said, all right, we're going to upgrade too. They upgraded their secondary. They added Devontae Adams. And then Denver said, we've had a good team this whole time. We just can't find a freaking quarterback. So we're going to go get Russell Wilson. So, I mean, you look at this division, and you could make it a legitimate argument for any one of those teams winning to the division, and it would be a legitimate argument. Now, I think there are some that are easier to argue for than others.
Of course.
But all four teams are solid, and all four teams are going to put up points.
So you mentioned, we're talking about the chaos of the offseason just in general. Do you think this kind of thing could be a new norm where you see all these big swings because of what you were saying, like it's being a little more of a player-run league?
Absolutely. We saw Devontae Adams kind of, make his feelings known. We saw that happen with Tyreek Hill as well, where he kind of said, look, you're going to either pay me a lot of this money that I want, or you're going to trade me. And we've seen a lot of players start to sit out if they're not getting what they want, whether that is, in training camp or preseason. And some of them, we've even seen it in regular season games. We saw that a couple years ago with Le'Veon Bell. Now it didn't pan out for him. But we've seen different players do stuff like this. So it is becoming much more normal. And I think a lot of players are going to see what happened this offseason and say, well, Devontae Adams got to go where he wanted the entire time. Tyreek Hill, he wanted to go to South Beach. That's where he's been wanting to go. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in Houston. I don't want to be in, wherever, Cleveland probably. I don't want to be in, wherever it is. Like, I would rather be playing here. So you're either going to pay me more than I'm worth, or I'm going to go take my services somewhere else.
As everybody knows, we are talking to Dynasty Nerds writer and podcaster Garret Bryce. Again, like we were talking about with San Diego or whatever, the Los Angeles Chargers.
Los Angeles, yeah.
Yes.
The third team of LA.
Yes, whatever you want to call it. But you talk about that team. But here's another team in the same vicinity. We were talking about San Francisco. The Los Angeles Rams, this offseason, they lost, obviously, Von Miller. By the way, Buffalo overpaying a guy that he's sensational. He's a great pass rusher still. I think he had 9 sacks. In the playoffs, he had 3.5 sacks. Fantastic. He was a big part of why they won, especially defensively in that fourth quarter. No question. But what Buffalo gave him was ridiculous. And then, but they upgraded. I think they upgraded the position. They brought in Bobby Wagner, who is so very underrated at the position. He's been one of the best linebackers in the league this year, and people forgot about him. And they didn't pay him that much, and they bring in a talented player like that. They re-signed and gave an extension to Aaron Donald, who is the highest paid player besides a quarterback in the NFL history, $40 million a year. And then today, they gave Cooper Kupp $80 million. So what do you think of this Rams team? Could they repeat with some of the acquisitions they made in the offseason, some of the players that they lost, and even there's still a chance they could still bring in Odell Beckham after bringing in Allen Robinson, which is crazy to say.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's a real chance that this team could be the first repeat that we've seen in a while. It doesn't happen very often, but they've got a great head coach in place. They've got two of the best defensive players in football, Aaron Donald, who is the best, Jalen Ramsey, who is an excellent corner on the outside. I mean, you can make an argument for both of those guys being top 10 players overall, not just on the defensive side of the football, just overall in football. So both really talented guys. But I think it still all comes down to Matthew Stafford. Is Matthew Stafford able to do what he did in the playoffs, be efficient enough, not make some of the mistakes? If he can do that, they have just as good of a shot as anybody else. And they're bringing back Cam Akers, who last year missed most of the season with that Achilles tear. Incredibly came back and played, which was shocking. But he didn't look like quite his old self. If he does get back to his old self, now you add a much more dynamic running game into the mix. It could be really interesting.
So both for a dynasty and a redraft perspective, one guy that you have as a sleeper this year and one guy that you think could be a bust this year.
Ooh, all right. So for redraft, one guy that I think could be an absolute steal this year is Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet for the Chicago Bears. You look at that offense, it's Darnell Mooney and it's Cole Kmet. There are no other pass catchers that are established there at all. And even the guys that they brought in, Velus Jones, they brought in the third round. Most people didn't think he was going to be taken until the fifth or sixth round. Then you had guys like Equanimous St. Brown and Byron Pringle that are there. Like, none of these guys are established stars. And the big thorn in his side forever was Jimmy Graham. And Jimmy Graham is no longer there. Justin Fields in his second year now.
Feel so bad for that kid, by the way. So bad for that kid this year.
They did him no favors.
No, not at all. The coach that they brought in and not giving him the wide receiving help that they should have absolutely did. I feel so bad for that kid.
Yep, but I think the beneficiary is going to be Cole Kmet. I think he was already 8th in football last year in targets, and the top 7 guys in targets last year were the top 7 fantasy football producers. Cole Kmet at 8 was at 19th. For fantasy football points. So that's an anomaly. Things are going to happen. It was literally because they couldn't get the ball in the end zone. He had 0 touchdowns on the year. So that's going to change. I think he's an absolute steal this year. Somebody that I think is going to be a bust. It's funny because I literally just mentioned this guy, but I've never been a huge Cam Akers guy. I've never been a huge fan of his game. I think he's a good athlete, but I think he leaves a lot to be desired on the technical aspects of being a running back. And, you add in the Achilles injury on top of it. I hear him going ahead of some guys that I really like. And I think he's just being a little overdrafted.
As everybody knows, we are talking to Dynasty Nerds writer and podcaster Garret Price. Last question for me, Garret. The Saints, and I think they're loaded. Offensively, this is probably the best wide receiving core that we've seen in a very long time. We've heard stories that Drew Brees might be thinking about coming back for another year. I know he slided it in on his Twitter that he might be interested. He's unsure after getting fired from NBC. Not surprised it didn't work out for him over there at NBC. He's not. And by the way, the contract that Tom Brady got was just outrageously crazy. I mean, I'll give Tom Brady a lot of credit. Even if he doesn't even know how to do that or be a broadcaster, to get to squeeze $350 million from NBC, Fox, I give him a lot of credit. It's an incredible thing for him. He's going to make more money doing that than he ever did playing football. So that's crazy to say that. But back to the Saints. You look at they added a wide receiver in the draft. Michael Thomas is coming back. Alvin Kamara is there. Who was the other wide receiver they have over there?
Jarvis Landry.
Jarvis Landry too. He goes over there, going back home. What are your thoughts with if let's say Drew Brees doesn't come back? I really believe there's a good chance that maybe not in the beginning of the season. I could see Drew Brees coming back. I could. But if it's Hill or Winston, is this team good enough with those two quarterbacks, with the weapons they have, to make the playoffs?
I think they could make the playoffs, especially because we mentioned earlier their division outside of Tampa Bay isn't the strongest division. And really, the NFC, a lot of these top quarterbacks are all in the AFC right now. I think the AFC is just going to be a knockdown, drag out. But the NFC is going to be a much easier path. So while I think they can make the playoffs, a lot of it really does come down to Jameis Winston. They did choose to bring him back. He's going to be the starter this year by all reports at this point. And we've seen flashes from Jameis. In fact, the beginning of last year, he actually played pretty solidly at the beginning of the year. Can he limit the mistakes and still make the big plays? And that's the question we'll have to see. So I think a lot of it revolves around him, but there's still question marks on, Chris Olave. As much as I think he's a very talented player, he's a rookie. We'll have to see how that plays out. Michael Thomas hasn't played football in forever. Forever. And he was never a guy that was winning on athleticism anyway. So you lower his athletic ability with all of these injuries and now age on top of it. Will he be able to come back and be the guy he once was? I don't know. And I love Juice Landry. As a Browns fan, love Landry. He changed the culture of Cleveland. But at the same time, he's not a spring chicken anymore. So there's a lot of potential there. But will it all come together at the right time? And that's the question. And you have a brand new head coach in Dennis Allen, who he's been with the team forever, and he's a great defensive mind. Can he bring it all together on both sides of football? That's what we're gonna have to wait and see. I think they can make the playoffs, but I don't think they last long.
All right, I know you're a big Ohio State fan. C.J. Stroud, big expectations for him this year. So, what do you think is his ceiling? And what are the odds you think he surpasses Bryce Young as what is thought of as that number one quarterback?
So, the thing C.J. Stroud has over Bryce Young at this point is the more prototypical size. Bryce Young, for all of his ability, which is incredible, he's 5'10". I mean, he's Kyler Murray. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the small, undersized quarterback. So that's the perk that C.J. Stroud has ahead of him. Both play in good divisions. One plays in the SEC, one plays in the Big Ten. So you don't have any knocks there. I think Bryce Young is a little bit better of a passer at this point. I think arm strength, he's got him by a little bit too. But it wouldn't shock me if C.J. Stroud is able to string together really solid games and then be able to perform big when the pressure is on, which last year he did fantastic with. You saw him be able to put the ball just on the money so often. I think it's going to be really close when it all is said and done. I still think Bryce Young will be the guy that goes ahead of him, but it's going to be a dogfight.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us again. We want to get you on soon again. You're awesome, and you give us so much information. We went through half the league, and it's great. So much information. And if anybody didn't hear this interview, well, you missed a really, really good interview. Garret, tell the fans how they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. You can find me at Dynasty Price on Twitter. Following me anywhere else would be a waste of time. But you can follow me at Dynasty Price on Twitter or on the Dynasty Nerds podcast. Always got good things going on. Always talking fantasy football.
Well, we got to follow each other because we got to interact.
Let's do it.
My Twitter is, I'm almost at 4,000 people, but everybody tells me I'm following you, but you don't post anything.
You just post once a month. And you post all the followers.
I have to start posting because people keep complaining. Why am I following you if you're not going to post? But they're all sports fans, and they're interested to see and hear the crazy stuff as much as they hear it on the show. The crazy stuff that I could say on, social media. But if there's any way you can get a hold of me is on Twitter, because that's the only thing I really look at. So anyways,
there we go. Let's connect, man.
Yeah, we will connect. Speedy will give you my Twitter, and then we'll follow each other, and we'll definitely keep connecting,
Perfect.
man. But we really appreciate you as always, and we'll get you on soon. Thank you, Garret.
Thank you guys for having me.